Well, it's my great pleasure to have Jacquie McIntyre here with us today. And Jack and I have known each other for many years now to do with consciousness work. Jack is a consciousness practitioner of, some note. And she's also a teacher of consciousness techniques, specialist of working with animals. And so welcome, Jack. And really interested to hear your viewpoint on what's going on in the world today, and particularly the shifts around the political posturing and the freedom of rights issues and so on and so forth, and also your views on the pollution profiles of the planet and what we're doing and for what reasons and so on. So I urge you just to speak openly as you go, and I'll certainly be asking you questions as we proceed. But I wonder if you could just introduce yourself, your life, a little bit about your life journey and how you've come to this place where you've got some strong opinions. So, there's always a backstory to the strong opinions, and I'm interested to hear that.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. And for anybody that's joined me across social media for the amount of time that I've been on there, they know that, especially for my private social media, I really like to share things that are insightful or uplifting, or as we kind of refer to as positive or whatever. And what I've noticed in myself, and I've spoken to a lot of other people, clients especially, in the past month or so, is that it's almost like this huge opening has happened where the deep feeling to share or to invite people to information or to speak about something that's true for you, to support people, is really huge right now. So that's where I'm finding myself. I'm finding myself in a space where, as you've seen, I'm speaking up quite a lot, and I'll just continue for that for as long as it feels like I need to, and then I'll probably call back into my cave again for a while. My background is varied. I think one of the reasons why I came to be a consciousness-based provider is because, like a lot of people, I come from a background of trauma and really needed to heal myself. And one of the beautiful things that we get to do when we're drawn to learn all of these or relearn all of these things, because that's all we're really ever doing, is just relearning things that we know in ourselves in consciousness, is we're healing ourselves, and we get to provide support and the platform for people to be able to do the same, and animals to be able to do the same in that respect. So my journey really has been about looking at stress and trauma, particularly about this return journey to self. And I think that's a huge thing that is under a bit of a spotlight for people right now, especially because that, it's a big phrase, return to journey, but what does it actually mean for people? It's a lot. It's kind of like this big pot that holds a lot of things, and you take the lid off it, and you could put your hand in there and pluck out any number of things that means to you individually about what your return journey to self looks like. So been really, really looking at that and discovering that, especially over the past probably 5 or 6 years, I would say, yeah.
So I just want to be clear about this myself, because it's an interesting way of viewing it. You're talking about your own journey and actually being able to make contact with it. So there's a journey going on, but it's the business of actually being able to, more fully experience or be aware of that journey. Is that what you're talking about?
Be more aware of that journey, be able to, I think one of the things that people are struggling with right now is the ability to be able to hold their own space. So that's probably one of those things in this return journey to self, is to be able to stay in your own space, to be able to hold your own space. without getting dragged out into somebody else's drama or the toxic stuff that's going on over there. And whilst there is a lot of great conversation going on right now, and there are a lot of people doing really, really amazing things, it's quite easy for people to lose sight of where they are and shift from their own center of gravity and be drawn out into other things, and then realize, crap, I don't know how to get back into that space. So I think that is definitely a part of, you know, what we call kind of this return journey to self, but it's definitely by no means the whole picture. I think another part of it is boundaries, right? I think that's a huge part of it, Neil. You know, I was talking to one of my clients the other day, and she said that she's not okay with forced vaccinations. And I said, so where's your boundary then around that? And she said, well, I don't know. Never really thought about it. And so part of what was coming up for her was, you know, being clear in where your boundaries are around things. It's okay to know that you don't want something, but then how far are you willing to let something go before it gets uncomfortable enough or critical enough where you go, oh, okay, well, that's enough for me now. That's now breached my boundary. Like, it's gone past my boundary. So that's another big thing that I'm really noticing is when, for majority of people, when we're born, we're not born into this really healthy respect for boundaries, whether it be ourselves or other people. We're not born into this understanding of even what they are. It's not taught to us. People don't use that word, healthy boundaries. They don't teach you, you know, they don't take a situation and say, do you see what happened there? That's a really great opportunity to learn a healthy boundary. It's not done in the home. It's not done at school. So then we have all these people of all different ages having just so many boundaries breached on a daily basis, and they don't recognize it. They have no kind of conscious awareness of it being an issue or needing to be put in place. And then when we come to these really big life experiences like this, where all of these things are happening and we're really not okay with them, I find like a lot of people are really stamping their feet and saying, I'm not okay with that, but then they don't know how to put a boundary in place or even what that looks like for them. So I think that's another factor about this return journey to self, to be honest.
Okay. So one of the things that, you know, has been coming up for me a lot recently is this business of everybody having a voice. And, you know, an aspect of what you're talking about here with these boundaries is that I've got a place here where I'm not going to be subverted. So it's that notion that I'm strong enough in myself that I actually know what it is that I think and feel and believe and so on, and that I will stand up. I will stand up for it. And what is it that's gone on? Do you see it as being like a cultural phenomenon? You know, both of us are in Australia. You're on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. Do you see there's a cultural aspect to this sort of almost like watering down of will? That's how it looks like. What you're talking about to me at the moment is that people have got to a point where they don't feel strong. They don't feel strong about things.
No, I think it's actually a little bit of a cesspool of a few things. I think it's cultural. It feels to me as though it's partly cultural. It also feels to me as though it's not just a Australian thing. Like, we have this mentality of, she'll be right, mate. You know, when in the past rules and regulations have been put in that people are not in agreement with, that it breaches your values or your boundaries, generally, you know, we have this culture of just wanting to go along with the flow, wanting life to return back to being comfortable as normal. So we do this whole, oh, she'll be right, mate, you know, and we ignore or really I think what people are doing is kind of going that at a subconscious level, that's just too hard for me to face. I can't do it. So I'm just going to do the whole, she'll be right, mate, and put it over there and wait till it gets too uncomfortable that I can't deal with it. But then as far as a global thing goes on, because it certainly isn't just here in Australia where we've done this, where these, you know, this hasn't happened overnight. This has crept up for decades and decades and generations. It's crept up. And I was really giving this quite a bit of thought over the weekend, and I was remembering back to my own childhood. And my childhood, you know, very similar to a lot of other people's childhood, is that when in my childhood, the consensus was that you go with whatever is dished out. If a new rule's put in place, you do it. If something's asked of you from the government, then you do it. So it's this also this mentality, this global mentality that the people that are put in as the rulers, and they're meant to be our matrix holders, our leaders. And I think we've forgotten even the definition of what a leader is that our growing up tells us, consciously and subconsciously told us every single day, you go with the flow, you conform, you abide, you don't ask questions, you find ways to work around it if you don't like it. So it just kind of told you, every step of the way told you to just deal with it. Don't do anything about it, just deal with it. And then I think we're at this real crisis point where all of that's coming to a head. There's that level, you know, from like how we're perceiving this reality from a conscious perspective, is that it's reached ahead from that level where it really has gone into this high ego level from these levels of power, I suppose. And now they're really putting the pressure on to ask people to do things that go against their values, their boundaries, everything that they kind of stand for, really, and seeing what resistance they get back from it. So now would be the time for people that if they feel in any way, shape or form that it doesn't align with their boundaries or their values, to find a way to peacefully be able to speak about that, or to get the message out to the current people, and I use the word current a lot, to the current people who are in power, that they're not okay with what's going on. And that's part of asserting, you know, your healthy boundaries. So as far as what's going on from a kind of deeper consciousness perspective, I think it's a bit more than that as well.
Cool. Look, I want to come back and actually ask you to expand upon what Jack's boundaries are. So like just actually explain some of that stuff. But the first question is, you know, like you have a lot of contact with a lot of people who are struggling, you know, with your work. And so the process, I just want to have a look at the process of somebody who, I could use strong, like very polarizing language. I could say there's sort of wishy-washy in them. So people have got wishy-washy kinds of feelings about stuff, but the pressure is mounting. So we have the situation where there's just more and more pressure mounting. Take us through the steps that a person goes through at that point. So they've been a bit easy-ozy and going with the flow and she'll be right, mate, and all that kind of stuff. But it's got to the point where actually, you know what, it just doesn't feel like it's something that I can say that it'll be right. You know, like I just can't feel that. But how do people actually crystallize this position within themselves? How do they become certain, you know, around what my boundaries are? How does that go?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's quite often one that's brought up a lot another thing that's not taught to people, along with healthy boundaries, another thing that's not taught to people is intuition. And that's one of our most prized and useful systems that we have, is intuition. And when somebody has a really great connection to intuition, then they will have a really strong sense of what their boundaries are, what's not okay with them. So this is something that I really actively teach with clients, with students, with whoever it is how to be able to decipher what is right for them, what is the current priority for them, how they can connect in with their intuition. And I actually think that you and I, Neil, were at the same event when one of the techniques that I teach was actually taught to us by Kerry D'Ambrosio in class, right? It's this simple calibration of yes and no. And the intuition system absolutely loves that simple calibration, because it can use that framework to be able to give you really clear directives as to the question that you've just asked me. Is the response that I give you a yes or a no? So to give you a, an example of that is, I use it in myself all the time. Even the posts that people see on Facebook, I actually sit with that before I do that. And I actually feel into, is this actually the right thing for me to do? Is this me overreacting and triggering? Or is this something really deep within me that just needs to be expressed? And if it does need to be expressed, then that's my truth. So I'm going to express it. So I always take that questioning to the whole body. Your intuition kind of is existing as part of the entire body-mind complex. So there's not one place that I focus on, or multiple places that I focus on for intuition. The whole of you is kind of intuition, but I really refer to it as a system. And no matter how hard I try to get away from that, I can't, because it's so interwoven and complex. But what a person can do is, and do you want me to give people an example?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would love for people to know how to do this, because it's so super simple. And the more they do this, the easier it's going to get for them. And you can use it in a fraction of a second, and it gives you your direction. So when you're asking yourself a question, and it could be, does that policy align with my truth? Does that policy align with what's right for me, or what's right for my family right now? And you're always asking right now, because things can change, right? What's right for you right now might be different in 3 months' time. So it's really clear that you're always asking, is this the right thing for me to do right now? Or it could be somebody asking you to get involved with an interview, or to go to a barbecue at their place, or to participate in some research or whatever. You always have that option of being able to take it to the intuitive system. Essentially, you're asking your essential sense of self, your deepest part of yourself. Is this the right thing for me to be doing right now? And it will give you a direct response. So let's calibrate yeses and nos, because you will get either a clear yes, or you will get a clear no. You also, if you're being a bit muddy with your questioning, or you're not asking the right word, you'll get a bit of a maybe feeling, and I'll kind of take people through that. And it just means you need to reframe it, or you need to take a little bit longer to ask the question. So a yes is simple. When you say yes, and this is something that people have to say out loud, they need to get their mouth involved, their voice box involved, and they need to say yes out loud. And when they say yes, they've got to pay attention to what it feels like in their body. What does yes feel like? So it might differ from person to person, but for me, yes starts down in my gut area and kind of moves upwards through the body. It has a lighter feeling. It has an upward expression. So yes, that's my yes calibration. That's what intuition gives me when yes is the response that I need to take. I will also calibrate then no. Now, no has a downwards pressure. No moves from inside the body being here, wherever inside the body is for you, here, and it goes downwards. So if you were to do yeses and no, Neil, how does it feel to you?
Well, look, I do a slightly different thing.
Yep.
And I'll actually ask different parts of myself for a yes or no, so that I can actually interpret what all the different bits of me are actually up to. But I'll definitely, when I get it, it's solid in my body, a yes or a no.
Solid.
Absolute solid feeling in the body. But it's in the minds and spirit as well.
Yeah.
Everything coalesces and so on. But that's my experience. But when I get a number of things. So when I'm getting close to the right question to ask, I'll get all kinds of ringing in my ears going on. So like that's always a trigger for me, that I know that I'm getting close to the question I should be asking. Yeah. And invariably, once I'm actually starting to get the answers coming through, my whole body will tingle.
Yeah.
That's when I'm getting the thing. So that's the body experience of that yes and no process.
I think for people who, if they're coming from this space of really having very little connection to their boundaries or their intuition, having a solid thing that they can do, whether it be something that you guide them through, or because there's so many different techniques that people can do, right? That one that I just spoke about is super good because it's easy to do. It's something you can keep practicing, and it gives you such great, reliable feedback every single time. Once you get that in place and you use it regularly, then you become so much more aware of your body's responses. So when you are getting closer to the answers, you will notice, oh my gosh, the moment I start getting closer to the yes, then my ears ring or my body starts to tingle or whatever it is. So you just start taking it lots of steps further. But I think that would be a huge empowering thing for people if they could really identify intuition and use it powerfully like it's meant to. It's not something that is designed that you go against. It's not something that, somebody brings to the table, something that they want you to do. They want you to have this, to change this, to swallow this, whatever it is. And that's not designed to happen if it goes against your intuition. Really, in the truest sense of nature, it should always be taken back to a person's intuition. Yeah. We have these options for you. What do you feel like is best for you? And then the person moves from that point.
Well, this is marvellous what you're talking about, because you're focusing in on the individual's responsibility for themselves. So it's not up to anybody else. It's not up to a strong leader or a strong parent or whatever to actually give you these things. And this is really what you're talking about. I just want to make an observation and get your feedback on it. And my observation is that, and this comes clinically, my observation I'm talking about here now, is that pretty much everybody receives the same information. So we're all perceiving the same stuff. So the perception is relatively uniform. And yet, I'm talking to Jacquie McIntyre at the moment, and Jack is perceiving the world, and so is Donald Trump. And yet Donald Trump is coming to a firmly held position, which is probably a little bit different to, or a lot different to, the position that Jacquie McIntyre is doing. So when I look at that, what I'm thinking about is filters. So like, what are the filters that perception is coming through? And then once you recognize it, because I can tell you that story, I can lead you into it in this way, because I know you see through this, and that is, what is truth? What is this truth? So could you talk a little bit more about your version of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Filters are how we perceive our reality. So, and those filters are built from a number of things, from a person's life experience, from the past life experiences that come from the soul, through genetic, epigenetic information, streaming through. There's so many factors, there's so many that contribute to these filters that kind of, we think that they attach according to, well, not according to, but we think that they attach strongly with the sensory systems and all levels of the mind. And they really do impact the way that people perceive reality around them, so perceive things that are unfolding, and the way that they receive information. So we know that if you have 10 people lined up or 20 people lined up and they're all viewing the same one event, and if you were to debrief with each one of them individually, they're each going to give you a totally different account of what they saw and what it meant to them and how they would replay it all back to you. So it's because of everything that they've been through, all of these experiences that we're going through, and we're all going through experiences now. They will either add filters or they'll be helping to break down the filtration system so that we can see and perceive more clearly, which I think that's what a lot of people are going through right now.
So given that this intuitive sense is going to be played through these filters as well, what would your recommendation to people around managing that process? Like, do we start by actually accepting the fact that we have filters? Is that the beginning place?
Yeah, absolutely. Neil, I really just think that awareness, and when I say awareness, I kind of mean knowledge, education, people just sharing their own understanding of how things work is key here. Because the moment somebody realizes that they're not seeing things completely clearly, they're not hearing things completely clearly, they're not, the whole 5 senses, however many senses we have, is heavily filtered. So the more awareness that we even bring to that knowledge will start the filtration system working differently. It starts to kind of crumble away those little filters. The more people are then inquiring about themselves, inquiring about the things happening around them, inquiring about their responses to things, it helps, every little bit helps to crumble those filters. Now, some filters are really healthy, we know this. Some filters are not healthy, they're detrimental, they prevent you from being able to see things clearly and truly as they are, from being able to hear what it is that you need to be able to hear. So it's about being able to have the healthy filters in place, and the healthy filters are the ones that stop you from getting overwhelmed and bombarded by information, or information that's not appropriate for you to consciously be aware of, and really moving and shifting out those filters that are preventing you from having a true experience of yourself and of reality.
Okay, so the role of filters is as a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
So we need to have filters as a survival mechanism. And I see that in terms of most disease as well. The disease actually functions as a filter, to actually manage information that's flowing. Anyway, that's a...
Talking about, education is quite powerful to me, and so that's why I practice the way that I practice. I make sure that clients are pretty clear around what's going on for them, because they heal so much quicker. They come to a beautiful place within inside themselves so much quicker. Their return journey to self is so much quicker and easier than what it is if you ask them to do that blindly. But then that same thing that we've just been talking about with, education is power, I've noticed that hugely in people that have little to no awareness of what their immune system is or what their microbiome is and how it functions. Because this fear around a virus or fear around microbes is now out of the park. It's really gone out there, and I get a very different experience of this particular virus. I actually get a very different experience of it when I invite it into my Mindscape workshop. I get a feeling of care and love and compassion, and I get a totally different experience of the virus than what the government is telling us. Which is interesting.
Yeah. So tell us about some of your boundaries at the moment. So we're talking about the response to a virus and so on. That'll be one of your boundaries. But what are the other important boundaries that you are sort of beating up against, or you're feeling that the community is beating up against? What's going on?
One of the ones that's probably coming up for me strongest at the moment, personally, but for other people, is around body autonomy. Not only is it a beautiful thing for somebody to be able to decide what course of healthcare they have, but also people knowing that it's actually meant to be just a divine option for you, where you are able to choose and have the right, health or medical processes for you. So definitely pretty significant boundaries around body autonomy.
Okay. Any other ones?
Personal space is quite a big one for me. And that might just be one of my personal ones, but I don't think it's really taught a lot of. As kids, I remember when family would visit and you'd be prompted by your parent to hug the strange family member that you hadn't seen in ages, that gave you really creepy crawlies underneath your skin. And if you didn't hug them, then, you were rude or whatever it was that they thought you were. So personal boundaries, whether it be physical boundaries, spiritual boundaries, emotional boundaries, whatever it is something that really should be at the forefront of, when somebody's looking at what are my boundaries, if it's just something that people are learning, really think about what are your physical boundaries. Are you okay with somebody just coming at you and wanting to hug you? Or do you feel like you want to say, actually, I'm not much of a hugger, or I'm happy to do a handshake, or whatever it is, because it's okay to do that as well, right? So, yeah.
Okay. So these are all freedoms, aren't they?
Yeah,
so
they are.
Boundaries are around freedom. So.
And they just really should be natural freedoms, not something that we're in a conversation about or we're having discussions about. Could I please have this freedom? I'd really like this freedom. Could you grant me this freedom? Or something that we're having to, what a lot of people are using the word fight for right now.
Mm-hmm. So, sorry, Jack. Yeah.
That's okay. The word freedom is really interesting because I've done a lot of personal self-reflection on that word. Because in one respect, I kind of feel like some of my freedoms are being breached right now. But then in another respect, I can go within myself and I always find freedom. Yeah. There's places that I am where I'm always totally free, no matter what somebody's doing or what's going on around me. So that I'm kind of really experiencing this paradox of, question marks around freedom, but then I completely have freedom, as I'm sure a lot of other people are.
Over the years, people have made beautiful art, around the topic of, you're in a prison, but you can find freedom within it.
Yeah.
And so on. But that doesn't take away, what's strong for you, which is that I don't wish for people to actually be put into a prison.
No, I don't.
That's the key thing, isn't it?
Yep.
So tell us about, you're talking about the unwanted hug from a strange relative or something like that, and, the creepy crawly feelings in the body and all the rest of it. How are you feeling about, the sort of embrace that's coming from pollution within our environment?
Oh gosh, it wasn't that slipped in there nicely underneath the radar. So my perception of all of that, and I think there's a lot going on. I think it because it's what I'm observing, but I also feel it deeply within me that there's more than one aspect to what it is that we're experiencing. It's not just, a government's agenda. It's not just a virus. It's not just, say, 5G technology or anything like that. I think there's quite a big pot to do with this, and a lot of things are in there, part of this right now. So the 5G technology especially is really concerning to me right now. And we have had this, steady climbing of technology as humans, required more access to internet or computer systems or phones or whatever it is like that. And up until a certain point, we've had really great tools to be able to help mitigate some of the harmful effects that come from harmful EMFs, because we have some what we consider to be healthy EMFs that the body makes, and then obviously harmful ones. And that has been in the steady uprising of 3G and so forth like that. So we've got access to many different therapies, many different technologies that help us mitigate the harmful effects. There are a lot of people that either don't know about that or they haven't had access to that, and they have already suffered really quite badly because of the body's responses or the symptoms that they get from exposure to those kinds of things. So now we're going into this new environment of 5G. My sense of things, my strong sense of things, is that the way that 5G is being pitched, because it's a business and so it gets marketed to the people, the way that it's pitched to people from a marketing perspective is that we're doing it for these reasons. And I can't find anywhere within me where those reasons are actually legitimate or truthful anywhere at all. And I trust my little radar for bullshit that I've got going on. So I think there's agenda. There's definitely ulterior motive that, and I feel like some of it I've been able to see over the last couple of weeks, and it still feels like there's a ton of it hidden that I don't have eyes on, may or may not become aware of what it is, but I'm certainly aware that it's there. My feeling is that 5G is really bad news. That's my personal feeling. Then I followed that personal feeling and went looking for evidence to support that. And we're really lucky, planetary-wise. We have a lot of really wonderful people that are bold and willing to step up and say, this is my experience of it. This is the information I have around it, or this is the data that I've got. This is the evidence I have, and they're putting it forward. So we have access to all of this really wonderful information that shows us how, in some cases, it's quite catastrophic, the 5G network, and the fact that they're putting it on top of schools and hospitals and healthcare centres and bus shelters and motels is really quite concerning. And it's really interesting that the moment that martial law is brought in and we're mandated to stay inside is that we see a huge outpouring of 5G network getting put up in 5G towers. So it's not something that I'm okay with.
That's the old saying, isn't it? If it looks like a fish and it smells like a fish, it's probably fish.
Yep.
And then you stick it under a microscope and it looks even more like fish cells.
Yeah.
But
there are some councils and governments and even shires around the world that have either absolutely refused this technology to come into their area, because they've done their research and they care about the people that live in their area, as well as the animals, the wildlife, the birds, the plant, because it affects everything, absolutely everything, even down to the structure of water molecules, right? And we're talking about rivers and streams and everything like that that will be impacted. And then we have all these areas such as councils and countries that are seriously got the information on the table and saying, well, this is really concerning, maybe we shouldn't do it. And they're considering not doing it at all. So it's great to see areas in that, you know, situation. But unfortunately, at the moment, Australia is definitely not doing that. The bulk of Australia and the government.
Yeah. We are not listening is basically what's happening. So, you know, clearly what you're doing, Jack, is you're taking this information. So you're being pitched, the government or the telcos are pitching to you, and you're putting it through yourself. So this is the recommendation to people is get equipped to be able to actually get an answer and, you know, feel it. Like, you know, the Jack method, which is a yes is going to come from the bottom up. It just feels right in the gut. Feels right from the bottom of our body. And no, it doesn't.
Flat out no.
And there's the start. Like, but that's the start for people, is to actually do that.
Yep.
The caveat that Neil would put onto that is just recognise that every bit of that is going through a filter.
Yep.
And do whatever you can to actually, you know, reorganise your filters and review them. Just actually really review them at all times. But don't, you know, my opinion, so I'm giving an opinion here, is that don't be frightened of the fact that you actually do have a place that you're coming from. So you've got filters, and these are my beliefs, and know that they're beliefs, but don't run away from the fact that you've got beliefs either, because that's a path to doing nothing.
Yeah, I completely agree about that. Yeah. I think if you're drawn to speak up or to let, you know, people know that you're not okay with it, then you really, really need to do that. You know, whenever there has been change around the world, and we've seen it happen a lot, where the intention to bring something out or to, you know, enact something has been there on the table. And there have been people that have come to that table and said, I'm not okay with that, or I don't agree with that, or this is my research that I found out, this is what I'm giving to you. It just takes a group of people to tip that, to get them to look at it. Pressure is really valuable. They do respond to pressure. They do respond to, you know, a majority of people being able to view the same consciousness, to be able to come to the same conclusion, and they will respond to that. So kind of coming to that conclusion yourself, where you say, oh, I'm really not okay with that, but then I don't really know what to do, so I'm going to do nothing. That is inaction, and that it is a form of suppression. And so what are you doing with that? It's got nowhere to get out, so we're just going to bury it, we're just going to suppress it, and that will make the body sick doing that. So putting it in an email, writing it on a letter, and just send it off. Just send it off. You don't have to do it in an aggressive way or a blaming way or anything. Just put it in bullet point form, make it really short, to the point, say, these are my concerns, this is what I found out, this is what I would like to see happen. And always finish off with what you would like to see happen, because you're tapping into what your vision of the future is. And that's what I'm really heavily doing right now, is doing a lot of, what do I see in my future? You know, I see cohesion, I see working together, I see laughter, I see connection. They're all things that I see. So build that somehow into your communication with these people, so that they can see your perspective, but also we don't realize it, but through consciousness, we're connecting with one another, and you might be seemingly opposing forces meeting one another, but it does allow each of us to be able to shift and change accordingly, even regardless of whether we realize it or not. So it's all valuable.
So what you're talking about is actually working within a system. So, we've got these strong leaders and they control so much of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're talking about is working within the system, which is advocacy. So I advocate in this direction, and a group of us, and many of us are actually advocating in this direction. And so, clearly what we're looking for then is for these strong leaders to actually then, take some type of action based on that. That's the hope, really. Is there another option rather than that whole structure?
Well, in my ideal world, Neil, the current leaders would not be the current leaders. In my ideal world, we'd have a group of people that perhaps have never been in politics or have very little to do with politics. I'd really like to see more people coming to the table of being matrix holders for a shire or a country or whatever, that are more heart-based, that are more aware of consciousness and how consciousness works, what it is, how we're all connected. People who are really willing to realise that there is no box, to go outside the box, to bring in new ideas, to bring in systems that maybe we've never, ever done before. And maybe the time to collapse all the old ways of doing government is around the corner. Maybe we don't need it anymore. Maybe that's part of why this is so uncomfortable for everybody, is because it just doesn't work for us anymore. Yeah. And having that old government shift away, having the old people associated with government who would normally step up, having them shift away, and having more heart-based people stepping into those roles. And also knowing, those people, those types of people are the ones that come to the table and they kind of go, I'm going to be here for as long as I know I need to be here, and then I'm going to swap out for somebody else. And it's just done in this beautiful, effortless way, but it's more centered around community. That's my vision.
Okay, cool. Tell me, what would your advice to, you've been very clear about your advice on following your intuition or finding a way of accessing your intuition. What other advice would you have for people right now, given the climate?
One of the things that I've really been prompted to do throughout this whole experience is put together some type of a really simple learning platform, a course that people can take. And it's going to be really heavily based upon people getting information, access to the information about the immune system, about the microbiome, about intuition, like bringing all these essential things together that as human beings, when we were born, if we were each taught, really, really well taught around what boundaries are, what intuition is, what immune system is, what microbiome is, if everyone had been empowered with that information from birth, we would not be sitting here, because we would just not have tolerated it. It would not have got this far. We would have had millions of people going, come on now, like, you're really trying to pitch that to me? I know different. Like, I've got different within me. That's not my truth. So we would have rejected it, or we would have asked for a different conversation a long time ago. We wouldn't be here. I walked into, I don't know if you're seeing the same thing where you are, but I walked into a chemist a couple of weeks ago, and there's all these big plastic perspex screens separating. And that's what it's doing. It's this kind of psychology of separation, right? Separating us all. And this plastic is all about fear, so that they're fearful and we're meant to be fearful. And I'm trying to have a conversation, a transaction with this lady through the perspex screen, and I tapped on the screen and I said to her, do you think this plastic's going to be taken away once the virus is gone? And she said, oh, I hope not. And her co-worker said, oh gosh, and I hope they don't do that. And I said, why would you hope that they don't take the plastic away? And she goes, well, we need it for our protection. We should be better protected. And I just said, thank you so much for saying that. I said, because now I know what I need to do. And I thought, if she was empowered, knowing what her immune system is and how it functions, how to strengthen it, what tools and resources she could have, if she knew what the microbiome was, internal and external, if she knew what intuition was or what healthy boundaries were, we wouldn't have had that conversation. She may have said, gosh, I hope that plastic gets taken down as well. So I'm definitely going to bring something to the table. I'm definitely going to be looking for collaboration because I don't have all the answers. I really want other people to bring their expertise and their points to the table. I'm really going to be looking from just lay people. I'm going to ask from clients, from anybody who can put in questions. If you could ask questions about anything that would empower you, what would those questions be? And make sure that we're answering those questions in this course. And it's going to be free. And it's going to be broken down into segments, so it's easy for people to be able to digest. And we're just going to spread it as far as we can. And then maybe it'll also prompt other people to build their own information and their own dialogue around this that they can share with their networks and their communities as well. And hopefully we can just spread around the whole world this empowering information so that people don't settle any longer.
Mm-hmm. That's terrific. Well, that's really great. And obviously on your web page that's associated with this interview, we'll have ways that people can contact you and get involved in that tool. That sounds like a wonderful thing that you're putting together.
I would love to know what people's questions are. I really would. Genuinely, I would love to know.
Perfect. Yeah, it's interesting, like this freedoms and you do a lot of work with animals and so on and so forth. And I'm sure you do the same as I do. Like I do a lot of work with microbes and actually trying to understand them. I'm interested in what you're talking about, this view of the love and that sort of thing from the virus. And like one of the other things that we see going on at the moment is not only the rollout of these pollutants in terms of 5G and so on, but it's this heading towards this immunization structures, which are going to be compulsory and so on. And I personally have an ethical problem with torturing a virus, crippling it and then sticking it into people. So actually putting that violence of the committed violence to the virus actually inside of people. So that's a personal position that I have. And as I'm saying that out loud, I don't often say that out loud to people. I'm getting a body reaction, so I'm getting that intuitive reaction.
Same.
And I know that it's filtered, but
can I add to what you've just said? And I completely agree with what you're saying. When you back a person into a corner and give them no way out, they're going to fight, flight, freeze, right? When you back an animal into a corner and you don't give them a way out, they're going to fight, flight, freeze. What we have been doing, and I don't know whether they have an awareness around this, but when you become invasive to a virus, they in some sorts, they're kind of going into survival mode and figuring out different ways to being. So we're seeing different versions of themselves. We're seeing mutation. We're seeing where they are getting really, really smart how to dodge the system. And so what the powers to be, who apparently are quite smart, what they do is go, oh, the virus has shifted. Oh, gosh, smart. Well, we need to develop another vaccine for that. And so then they give another vaccine. That virus goes, oh, no, you don't. You kidding? And so then it just mutates or forms another, off branch of itself. And we could keep playing this game for the rest of time. And what are we going to do? Are we going to be having you know, 300-400 vaccinations a year to chase microbes that, you know, it's not going to work. We won't survive that, and it's not smart, Neil. It's not smart.
Okay.
Is my perception of that.
Jacquie McIntyre, look, I'm so grateful for the conversation today, and you know, I urge people to reach out to you, and as I say, we'll have all the links actually associated with this talk on the website, and you know, go well with your work. And this tool that you're putting together is absolutely fabulous, and I love it that it's going to be a collaborative tool. I'm actually developing a tool myself at the moment, and it's a collaborative project as well, and it's around trying to actually make sense out of the psychic noise. So
nice.
That's what my tool's about, and it's not about trying to protect ourselves from, you know, the psychic noise that's going on out there, or, you know, the panic and everything else that's going on. It's not about that at all. It's actually about allowing people, giving people a tool to actually focus that crazy, chaotic energy into something which has meaning for them.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a lot of parallels, you know, in terms of what we're doing. And I sense in you is that intuitive need to, you know, create the tool that you're creating. And I certainly sense within myself the same thing, is that I need to create this tool. You know, it's a powerful intuitive urge, you know, to do these
And isn't it beautiful, really, what's going on, Neil? Because I was sitting here yesterday thinking, you know, without this crisis, would this have come up for me? Or would it, you know, that part of life continued to be comfortable and I just developed the other courses that I developed? So I'm kind of grateful for what's going on in many respects. And that's one of them, is that it really urges me to take specific action.
Perhaps this is part of the overall message.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me in.
Okay, cool. Oh, we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, definitely. I look forward to that. Thanks, Neil.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.